The garlic? Yes, absolutely. And it doesn't taste, it's not a pre-marinade. It's not going to taste very good. Yeah. And the reason I say that is we have each spring and each fall, we have kind of the same deal there where somebody will say, we didn't manage, they never tell us they didn't manage the pastures very well. But you can tell the pastures were managed very well. Cattle got into wild onion, wild garlic. If you can smell that on them, all right, just dry lot them to get that out of them because it's not a pre-marinade. You're not, and it's just going to make that fat taste nasty. And I get that phone call at least once or twice a year of people saying that they took something to the processor and it just tastes bad. Of course, they won't blame the processor. Then you start playing the quiz game and find out, yeah, they could have got into wild onions or wild garlic or something along that line. And it's just nasty.
Sort of like the time it takes to get that out?
Usually around, and help me out, guys, in the back, about 30 days or so. Yeah, dry lot.
How do you determine who's a good processor and who's not? What are the things to look for?
Usually I tell folks it's a little bit of a loaded question now because, it's probably not a loaded question now. 2 years ago, it had been a loaded question. Everybody was booked solid for years on it. People were making reservations and processors for animals that hadn't even been born yet. All right. But if I call up a meat processor nowadays and say, how soon can I get him in? And he said, tomorrow, kind of have to scratch your head. All right. Why can he get it in tomorrow when I just called XYZ processors and they say 3 months from now? But there's a little bit of that going on. Asking around if they have a retail sales area, like if you go over to Bardstown, Boone's has a retail sales area. Go in there and look at what those cuts look like, because that's what you're going to get back. Because the same guys that are cutting for that retail meat case are probably going to be cutting your stuff up as well. If you go all the way over to Hopkinsville to Hampton, same thing. You go in there and look at it. Visit the place, all right? You walk in there. Meat facilities, they have their own unique smell, all right? But if you get a kind of a sour smell when you get in there, that's not a good idea. One that's, you're probably going to think I'm crazy for saying this, but I had a customer, a client call me up and say, we went in there and it smelled like bleach, so we're not going there ever again. I'm like, that's a good thing. What do we mean it smells like bleach? Bleach is a sanitizer. That means they're clean. If you can smell bleach, that's a good thing, all right? If you go in there and you smell nastiness, that's a bad thing. That's a bad thing. So there's little things like that. And it depends on what your your goal is. If you're just wanting something for the freezer, visit, kind of look at what's going on there. If you're wanting something to sell at a farmer's market, then you got to make sure everything's inspected.
Now, I heard, I don't know how true or not this is, but a lot of processors don't want to do yet because the bone is harder. Goes through their equipment more, the bandsaws and things and stuff?
I'll tell you, we were going to do those at our lab, and we couldn't take them because our knock box is designed after they leave the scale, it gets progressively tighter, and we couldn't get those horns in our knock box. That could be that as well. Bone-wise, I have a feeling they're trying to tell you they're not going to take it and be polite about it because they're older. And when they're older, we have to handle those animals differently, all right, because of BSE concerns, all right. We've got to handle that. And so a lot of them are not equipped to handle older animals because of that BSE concern. Does that mean every old animal has BSE? No. It's just we have rendering regulations in place, and they can't take them because they can't. So they won't come get stuff if they're Are you wanting to cook some of these up? Yeah.
Will when we, yes, I will.
Yeah. Other questions? No other questions? It can't be that good. I got everything answered. I'm going to throw it away. It's not
I know you are, but if it wasn't aged, what would you normally do?
We grind it.
Just grind it.
Ground product, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this was aged how long? Do you remember how many days?
You've had it for...
Maybe about 3 weeks.
You've had it for at least 3 weeks.
And it was hanging 10 days before that?
Yeah.
dry aging, what's the difference between dry and wet aging, Dr. Rentfrow?
Dry aging, let me try that again, I swear to myself. Dry aging is where we just let the carcass hang there, all right? Just let it hang there for a certain period of time. Wet aging is where we, and this is what happens in the industry. So if you've been raised on grocery store meat, you've had wet aged meat. And essentially what happens is, in those big plants, is 24 hours later, as soon as they make HACCP temp, all right, that's a food safety regulation, as soon as they make that temp, they're going to be cut up into primals and subprimals like what you saw here, put inside a vacuum bag, put inside a box, and they will age inside that vacuum bag as they go from your processor to the warehouse to the grocery store. They'll age inside that bag, and that's called wet aging. Is there a flavor difference between dry aging and wet aging? Yes. Is there an odor difference between dry aging and wet aging? Yes. Dry aged beef has been described as kind of a nuttier, woodier, earthier, blue cheesier flavor, okay? Whereas wet aged is just what you get in the grocery store. So. Cool. Now, what is the buzzword out there in these big 5-star Michelin-style restaurants? Dry aged steaks, and that's where they'll get in the primals, the subprimals, like I just talked about, the wet aged stuff, and they'll put them in a cabinet and further dry age them another 3 months plus. And when you see those things come out, they're just dehydrated humps, and they have to carve all that dehydration off of there and serve it. All right, that's why if you go to a place that's doing their own dry aging, you're probably talking about a plate cost of $150+ a plate for that kind of stuff, because they have to account for all of that.
And what about specialty cuts with the isn't that a market now?
You can. The challenge is that part of the reason why we do those specialty cuts with the beef cattle is they've gotten so big. And somebody asked me one time, why are your knives so big? Because the cattle have gotten big. And so we can do that. So, for example, these picanhs or the culotte steaks, they're 10 times the size of these out of beef cattle, you know. And so I've got more to sell there. But with the yak, the cuts, they're not as big as beef cattle, so you could do that. You're gonna get a flat iron that's like this versus a flat iron that's this. Wow. But you can. The cuts are there, but it's not.
Okay. And what was your PhD based on again? What's
Meat science and muscle biology.
Wow.
Yeah.
This is amazing.
Yeah. We have our own club, the American Meat Science Association. Yeah.
Seriously?
There's a secret handshake, and I'd show you, but then I have to kill you.
So, do you have any recommendations for the hump meat?
That is that muscle is tough. If we get an animal that's got a big crest on it or a hump like that, typically we cut it off and grind it. To be honest with you. It'd be kind of cool to tear into one of those carcasses just to see, because I can get a fairly decent idea of how tough something is going to be when my knife goes through it. You notice the knife sung through this stuff pretty easily. The tougher cuts, I have to put a little bit more elbow grease in it. But I can tell that hump or rhomboideus is his Latin name, and beef cattle is tough. I don't think it's any different.
So that's going to be for ground.
Yeah.
So what about ground yak? It doesn't have a lot of fat in it.
Nope.
Is that an issue still?
It's going to be lean. Yeah. It's going to be lean.
As far as holding together and everything?
Fat does kind of give you a little bit of a bind in there, and these guys won't have that much bind, but the way you can get around that is instead of seasoning it as you cook it, season it, then mix it up, and that salt will extract some of that stuff and bind it together.
I've used ground yak a lot, and as long as you compress it, it stays together pretty well.
I mean, I ate it before. It's really good. I like it. It just puts a little
Is also filled the whole leanness thing with putting pork in it too. Mix it up with the
Yeah, I was thinking that because we do that with beer, and a lot of times we'll add some pork breast in there to fatten them up. Yeah.
So with the yak burger, making some burgers, we cook it a little slower. We cook it on our smoker that's also a grill, but we do it on indirect heat, and that keeps it from drying out.
Other questions? Comments? Complaints?
Jim, Mike, yeah,
Sorry, Mike.
we were gonna say something on the fat content.
Oh, yeah, sorry, I had to check, make sure nothing was burning. In your packets back there, there's a summary of some of the samples we collected. So I went to grocery store chain, and I bought typical bison that's there, and then choice, prime, and grass-fed beef samples, and they're all sirloin steaks. So the sirloins that Dr. Rentfrow showed you here. And then we worked with some yak producers across the different areas. Actually, a lot of samples came when we were out of Denver, but we brought their sirloin steaks there. We had one particular farm that had finished the animals about 60, 70 days on corn silage. So they were grass finished up until about 60, 70 days before harvest, and they went to corn silage. And then everybody else pretty much was a straight forward-based grass finished. Is there any marbling in them? No. Dr. Rentfrow asked if there's any marbling. So what we did, or what I did, is I took those samples, I trimmed any big seam fat pieces out, and then I went through and just ground those and double ground those, and then took them over to UK regulatory services and had them run moisture, fat, and protein on them. And so there were 11 beef sirloins that we tested, and I just cooled all the beef, both the prime and the grass-fed and everything together, just in this quick summary. But moisture was 75%, protein was 22%, fat was 4.7 on average. The bison, I had 6 samples on the bison. They were about 81% moisture, 22% true protein, 1.7% fat. So significantly less than beef, and that's what we expect, right? The corn silage fed yaks weren't any different really than either the bison or the grass-fed yaks. They were pretty much spot on to the bison at 1.6% fat. The grass-fed yaks were at 0.9, and there were 14 samples. I had 14 different sirloins from the grass-fed yaks, so they were by far the lowest, and almost a quarter of what the beef samples were. In the beef samples, there were 3 choice, 3 prime, 3 grass-fed, and 2 organic grass-fed. So we're trying to get a broad spectrum of different potential products that were out there. So very, very lean, nearly identical to bison. Temperament-wise, a whole lot easier to work with than bison. So there may be the opportunity as a red lean market exchange or something like that. So that's all pretty much. I mean, when you look at it, 22 to 23% right across the board. Yep, pretty much.
Yeah, usually the moisture and the fat is like give them a high moisture, low fat.
Yep. So when you look at them, I mean, even these would be very representative of the samples that we got. There's not a whole lot of margin. Nope.
Well, it's like wrapping them in bacon, how would you prep them? Since they're so low.
You can do several things like bacon or butter. I mean, Dr. Anderson, he was telling me, how do you do that with yours? You were telling me earlier today.
Yeah. I make a bacon and butter iron.
Bacon and butter iron.
Take bacon, 6 cut bacon strips from Kroger, put them in a square on my griddle, put butter in the middle of it, and bacon. Cook, grease kind of, and then let it 4 or 5 kilos, and then with the steak, right, and then it cooks pretty quick, I think.
Yeah, it should quick.
And hamburgers, obviously, a little bit longer. But I'll be honest with you, I love it. I bet everything
So if you want to keep it somewhat healthy, how would you go about it?
I would do olive oil, salt, pepper, and throw that on a charcoal grill for about 4 minutes per side.
Okay.
Just like venison.
Yeah. The other thing I'll do is sous So I'll just put them in a bag and put them in water and sous vide them, and then just take them out, throw them on a grill, and get marked and done.
Yeah. Is it good on the grill?
Everything's good on the grill.
Okay.
Everything's good on the grill.
Okay.
Yeah, but I think, you know, the take-home message with any piece of meat is don't overcook. You know, and just because there's an opposite high doesn't mean you cook on that. You got boil water on that, yeah.
So the samples that we've got going to the chef, help me remember, Greg, we sent ground, we sent a roast,
Yeah, I think so.
and we sent sirloin steak.
Here's some yak steak. Yak steak.